Latier City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
Claudio Sennhauser, who's sitting here, he'll be talking today about the joy of public speaking. He will share tips and proven techniques to help you speak with confidence and joy in front of others. Before moving to Thailand in 2008 to help others improve their presentation skills, Claudio worked as a technology evangelist for prominent companies including NCR, Motorola and SanDisk. He's co-author of the book Giving Memorable Product Demos and president of Lyon Toastmasters Club, which is part of a global non-profit organization that helps people improve their public speaking skills. He was born and raised in Switzerland, but he moved to the United States in his early 20s. After almost 2 decades in the US, he moved to Thailand, which further increased his understanding and sensitivity of different cultures, beliefs, and ideas. In his spare time, he enjoys being behind the viewfinder of his camera, simply hanging out with friends, enjoying good food, drink, and conversation. Please welcome Claudio Sennhauser.
Thank you very much for this wonderful introduction, and thank you for the clicker. Here we go. It is a real pleasure for me to be here today. You are all members of a club. From time to time, you will have to speak in public. And many people, they are looking at this title and they say, what is this, an oxymoron? The joy of public speaking? Is this guy really clear in his mind? Those two words don't go together. But when you look at a really great presentation, a great speech, I think a great speech is a little bit like magic. Now, allow me to demonstrate what I mean by that. But I do need your participation for a quick magic trick that we are all going to do together. All right? Are you ready for that? Yes? This, by the way, is yes. This is no. Okay, so let me put the microphone over here because I will need both of my hands. And what I'm going to ask you to do is simply follow what I'm going to do. So take your left arm and hold it out like that. Then turn it around. Put your thumb at the bottom so it points to the floor. Take your right hand, reach over and clasp your hand like this. All right? Everybody in the back, just a little bit higher, Okay? So, now, on the count of three, please do what I do. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Oh. What happened? Well, this is magic. In fact, this is actually a magic trick that real magicians use to warm up their audiences. Now, the reason why I say a good presentation is a bit like magic, like this, is because both rely on principles. Very simple principles. In magic, these principles are misdirection, or perhaps sleight of hand. Well, I'm here today to share a few principles with you about public speaking. The first one is that any speech that you're giving is not really about you. It's not about you. About whom is it then? Well, of course, the audience. But not just the audience. every speech that you want to give, you have to make sure that you answer the one question that's on the top of everybody's mind. Because you see, in some sense, we are all really, really selfish. Even the most altruistically minded people in this audience, you do what you do because it makes you feel good. So in a good presentation, the first principle, it's not about you. It's what it does to me, to the audience. Now, it can be an idea, it can be a product, it can be a service. It doesn't really matter. The key is to make your presentations in a way that they resonate with the audience and answer the question, what's in it for me? What does it do to me? Steve Jobs was probably the best business presenter of our lifetime. And when Steve Jobs, 20 years ago, announced the iPod, a product that changed the entire music industry, right? He could have done it like this. He could have said the iPod, it's a portable music player. It only weighs 6.5 ounces. It's the size of a sardine can or a cigarette box. It has 5 gigabytes of memory. Blah, 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 blah. Right? But this is how most people present their products, their ideas, their services. They talk about the features, they talk about the specs, they talk about all these kind of details that explains what it is, but it does not explain what it does. So what did Steve Jobs do? He didn't announce the iPod like that. Does anybody know how he did it? The next day, it was in every newspaper. That one line that he used to position the iPod. He simply said, here it is, the iPod. 1,000 songs in your pocket. Now, isn't that a great, great difference between all the specs and telling you what an iPod is versus what does the iPod really do, right? It puts 1,000 songs in your pocket. And then later on, he even classified and clarified those 1,000 songs. And he said, it is your entire music library in your pocket. Now, we are all of advanced age, so for us, this really resonates, because 20 years ago, our average music library was really about 1,000 songs. Hardly anybody had more than 100 CDs, unless you're really an audiophile, okay? So he announced it like this. The first one clearly told people what the product does. It puts 1,000 songs in your pocket. The second one told people what it means. It means that you can carry your entire music library in your pocket. So this is the first one, right? When you give any type of presentation, when you speak in public, make sure you do it in a way that people can resonate. You do it in a way that people understand, aha, this is what it does for me. This is what it means to me. So that's principle number 1. Principle number 2, it's all about feelings. Any speech that you give is really about feelings, right? It's not about specs. It's not about data. It's not about info in itself. But in fact, it really is about emotions. Maya Angelou said it perhaps best. She said, People will forget what you say. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. Now, how do you actually make somebody feel something? How can you do that? Well, I got news for you. You already do. Every single time you communicate with somebody. You may not be aware that you're impacting their feelings. You may not be aware that you're having an impact on their emotions, but you actually do. It is impossible, absolutely impossible not to communicate. You cannot not communicate. And you cannot not make people feel something, even if you're not aware of it. Perhaps you're instilling boredom. It's a feeling, it's an emotion, right? So how do you actually make people feel something? Well, the first step is go first. If you want to project enthusiasm, be enthusiastic. If you want to project excitement, well, feel excited yourself. We all have been in rooms with people, highly charismatic people. They just enter the room and we already sense there is something about that person. Why is that? I believe that we may be out of battery. No, there we go. So, I believe that emotions are contagious, right? Just because we cannot see them, cannot feel them. It's kind of like a remote control or a clicker for these slides. You cannot see a beam coming out of this thing. You cannot see or you cannot hear a beam coming out of this thing. You cannot feel it, you cannot smell it, and you cannot taste it. Yet, it is there. Thank you very much. It is there, right? So emotions, like that beam of this remote, up all of it again, including the reboot of the white. Oh, there we go. All right. Hey, hey! That was probably the fastest recovery from a technical failure that I've ever experienced. Thank you very much, Brad, for doing this so quickly. So emotions are, in fact, contagious, right? People do feel it. If you want somebody to feel something, get into that state first. You cannot, it is impossible to get somebody excited about something without being excited yourself. Simply impossible. Now that is the first step. But there are other things that you can do, which is the use of adjectives. Again, Steve Jobs, one of the greatest presenters in the world, he used adjectives in a tremendously powerful way. Tremendous, right? And he did not just use the words, but he lived the words. When he talked about an awesome product, you could feel that awesomeness. Okay? So use appropriate adjectives. This is just a short list. The English language in this sense is absolutely beautiful. How you can express your emotions by just putting a single word in front of your idea, your product, your service. Okay? So adjectives is the number 2. And the third one, of course, is stories. People love stories. In fact, when people listen to a story versus just looking at slides and listening to numbers, their brain really works differently. This is what I love about the time that we are living in. We are living at a time where we are discovering so many things about how the the human brain operates. And when you take a brain scan of somebody listening to a presentation, you will see that their auditory cortex, the hearing, and the visual cortex are active. If they're only looking at slides, if they're only listening to facts and figures. But as soon as the speaker introduces some kind of a story, all of a sudden there are other areas in the brain that kick in. All of a sudden we have the kinesthetic cortex, the feelings that are coming in. So stories are an absolutely great way to position whatever your message is, to wrap your message into stories. Now, stories don't have to be long. I really dislike when speakers are out there and they're telling stories, perhaps personal stories, with no end, with no point to it. This is not what I mean. Stories can be really, really short. There is, for example, one story about Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway was once sitting together with a couple of friends. And he said to them, "I bet you that I can write the story in just 6 words. A full story with a beginning, a middle, and an end." And his friends looked at him and said, "Well, you know, Ernest, you are a really, really talented writer, but 6 words for an entire story? That seems an awful few words." Well, this is what he came up with. For sale. Baby shoe. Never worn. Thank you. So this one takes a little while. But this is the beauty about stories. People fill in the necessary details themselves. So you're reading this and you're going like, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. And then all of a sudden it hits you. Why? So stories can be extremely powerful, and stories do not have to be lengthy. They can be very, very short to make a point. Just like this one that makes the point about short stories. All right? So stories is the third one. And then the third principle is to keep it simple. Every single aspect of a speech, it needs to be kept simple for people to really follow, for people to really, really understand. Right? Keep it simple. Now, I could talk for hours about how to keep your language simple, how to keep your gestures simple, how your body language should look like, and so on. But the one thing that I do want to focus on right now are slides. Because today we hardly ever have a presentation, we hardly ever give a speech in which we don't use slides. But unfortunately, when people create slides, they often do not look all that great. In fact, the slides that I see the most look like this. They contain every single word that the presenter will say. They have different fonts, they have different colors, they have bullet points up to the gazoo. But is that really required? Not at all. In fact, the problem with this is, and I can tell right now, many of you have stopped partially listening to me because you're still reading. And when you read something, there is an area in your brain called Broca's area, right? And when you read something, what do? You internally sub-vocalize. And you cannot listen to 2 people at the same time. Well, guess which one your brain favors? Your own internal dialogue or what's coming from the outside? So as long as this slide is up, I am fully aware that you are not listening to me as much as if I make that slide go away and put a slide that really makes exactly the same point as the previous slide, but with only a few words and an image. Experts talk about picture superiority. And if you think back, I think everyone in this room is probably old enough. Sometimes I do workshops and I have these youngsters in there. And I ask them, do you know why we call them PowerPoint slides? Does anybody in this room know why we call them slides? Sir? You do? Slide projectors, exactly. But the young kids today, they don't know anymore, right? The 35mm slides. In the beginning of my career, when I went to customers, I went with a slide projector and a roll, one of these carousels that had all these slides in it, right? And I prayed to God that I don't drop that carousel on the way in, because all of a sudden the slides are reversed, I need to sort them again. It was a pain in the neck, all right? And then what happened? All of a sudden, PowerPoint appeared on the scene. And when you create a PowerPoint slide today, when you say File, New, and you create a new presentation, what's the first thing that you see? If you haven't done this recently, well, you see your cursor blinking next to a bullet point, encouraging you to now dump your brain onto that slide, bullet by bullet by bullet. And that's why so many of these slides look like that. But you know what? Bullets should not be for your friends. Do not use bullets on your friends, customers, or people that you want to actually get your message. All right? So keep it simple, especially the slides. Keep the slides as simple as possible. Make them picture-oriented. Think back to the slide projector, right? What did we have to do when we wanted to have visual aids? Well, we shot photographs, and these photographs, they represented part of our talk, the main message. So this is as far as simplicity goes. So these are the 3 principles that I wanted to share with you today. It's not about you. Turn things around. Turn things around. And whenever you give a speech, ask yourself, first and foremost, my message, whatever your message is, my product, my idea, my service, what does it do? What does it mean to people? Okay? The second one, it's about feelings. Do anything possible. Feel the feelings you want them to. You know, I sometimes see people and they were taught to constantly smile when they are on stage giving a speech. Constantly smile. And sometimes they're talking about, and I was so sad. I was really sad at that moment, you know? And they're smiling and the congruence is gone. And guess what? People believe their eyes more than their ears. In fact, there is a researcher, McGurk. His name is McGurk. And I didn't include a video here because I wasn't sure about the entire infrastructure and how well videos would play. But I encourage you, when you are in YouTube the next time, type in McGurk effect. M-C-G-U-R-K. McGurk effect. And it will baffle your mind. It is basically the face of a person that just does this. Ba, 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 ba. Continuously, non-stop. But at one point, they change how he looks. Instead of, he looks like that. He still says ba, ba, ba. But the amazing thing is, and I encourage you, try this yourself. Go to YouTube and look at this. And you will be able to compare the different two versions. If you're looking at the picture with him going ba, 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 you hear a B. But once he does, you automatically hear fa, 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 even though he still says ba. And this is how our brain sometimes corrects. And the visuals, they come before the auditory aspect. So keep this in mind, all right? And then the third one, keep it simple. I will most likely come back to this club because I really think this is an awesome group of people, and I would love to see other speakers, how they are performing up here. And I hope anybody that's in this room right now, if you ever have to give a speech, if you ever can give a speech, I hope you will never use slides like the one that I showed you with all these bullet points. All right, so these are the three main messages that I wanted to communicate. But wait, there's more. There's more. I still have some time left. So one more thing. And by the way, this also is an effective trick that people use. Steve Jobs, for example, he used it tremendously well. Because even if you don't know much about public speaking, one thing you probably know. The opening and the close are the two most important parts. In the middle, you can put whatever you want, more or less, right? Cannot fill it totally with garbage, but it is the opening and the close that people really remember the most. So I want to share one thing with you. And that is that even if you have all these principles covered, you make it simple. You have a focus on your audience, right? You tell them what it means, what it does, and you evoke some feelings. There's still one thing that often gets in the way of a great speech, of a great presentation, and that is speaking anxiety. Speaking anxiety is something that even professionals suffer quite a bit, right? And in my job as a pitch coach and presentation skills trainer, I often get questions. How can I increase my confidence? How can I minimize my speaking anxiety? I don't want that feeling anymore. And often these questions are almost like looking for a switch. But confidence and speaking anxiety are not binary, right? They're analog. So you cannot just turn a switch and say, okay, now I'm confident. Wow. No. It doesn't work that way. It's gradually that we are getting there. So if I'm going to ask this group right now, and I say, okay, I give you 1 minute time to think about a time when you hesitated. When you hesitated. And I want you to come up here and give a 2-minute speech about that moment. So here is your task. I will ask one of you in about a minute to come up here and talk for 2 minutes about a moment in your life when you really hesitated. Now, of course, I'm not going to do that because I already see like the looks on your faces, right? But I want you to pay attention to the feeling that you just got. Some of you are seasoned presenters in this room. You probably went like, yay, great, I'm going to get on stage and I'm going to talk for 2 minutes. This is fabulous. Yeah, there you go, right? So some people are like that. But many went like, oh, no, don't pick me, please. No, I don't want to. No, and just 1 minute of preparation. Ooh. So speaking anxiety is something real. Speaking anxiety is something that most of us experience. I experience it as well, right? And I do this for a living. But I experience it, and I have learned to funnel it, to harness that anxiety and make it work for me. Make that energy work for you. Now, how do you do that? How can you minimize your anxiety? How can you increase your confidence? Well, whenever we learn something, whatever it is, any skill that we learn, we actually go through 4 different stages, right? We start out with what experts call unconscious incompetence. Unconscious incompetence. You don't even know that you don't know, right? You don't even know that you don't know. For example, I would assume most in this room here at one point or another learned how to drive a car. Is that correct? Right? Yep. Okay. So, when you were really little, you may not remember it, but when you were maybe 5 or 6 years old, you had no clue that there is a skill involved in driving a car. You simply didn't care. But then you grew up, you grew a little bit older, and all of a sudden you watched perhaps your dad drive the car, and you see him do something with his feet and his hands and arms, and you go like, there is some skill involved with this. So that's when you moved from the unconscious incompetence to a conscious incompetence. Before, you did not know that you don't know, and now you know that you don't know. You still cannot do it, but at least you know that you don't know. And then we reach the next level. And how do we reach the next level? How did you reach the next level of driving skill? Training. You had some training, right? Your dad, who baffled you before with all his gestures and things that he did in the car, he took time out and said, come on, son. Come on, girl. Sit here. I'll teach you. So you train. And all of a sudden, you reach the level of conscious competence. So we went from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence. Now you know how to do it. You took a couple of lessons. Your parents showed you how to do it. But for the first couple of 100 kilometers, for the first couple of 100 miles, you weren't all that confident yet, right? You had to think, what do I do with my feet? When do I have to push that clutch? What do I do when I want to turn? Which side is the signal on? All these kind of things. But then, all of a sudden, you drive. And you drive a couple 100 miles, 100 kilometers, maybe 1,000, 2,000. And what happens? It becomes second nature. So, of course, if you followed this progression now, you know the last stage, we call it unconscious competence. Now, you have a certain level of competence, and you don't have to think about it anymore, right? Today, everyone in this room is probably sitting behind the steering wheel, and you drive without thinking. In fact, I make a bet, many of you in here, you probably at one point or another were surprised that you already were at home, because you were sitting in your car, you're driving, and you're thinking about something, because the driving in itself doesn't take too much effort anymore. And all of a sudden, and you go like, whoa, wow, totally lost in thoughts, all right? So training on one side, right, lifts us into the competence zone. But to reach the absolute level of mastery of unconscious competence, you need to do more than just train. You need to practice. You need to practice and practice and practice, right? Now, how often do you have a chance to practice public speaking? Not that often, I would assume, right? Perhaps you can. I think the No, I've actually been at presentations where I was timed, whether these are contests or whether they are investor pitches, right? And if you exceed the allotted time, they switch off the microphone. So I already was like, oh my God, did I already go over? No, it's impossible. No. 35 minutes so far, so not that bad. All right, so how can you practice? How can you practice public speaking? Do you just want to stand in front of the mirror at home and rehearse a speech that you're going to give at one point? I have a better idea. And this is actually the reason why I'm here, because I am the president of a club called Toastmasters, or Lyon Toastmasters. How many in this room have ever heard of Toastmasters before? Oh, okay. So in that case, we can cut this extremely short. Toastmasters was originally founded in 1924. It's an old organization, almost 100 years old. Its original founder, Ralph Smedley, he founded the club in Anaheim, California at the YMCA because he wanted to help young people to improve their public speaking skills. And he came up with a really, really nifty program that has survived for almost 100 years. In fact, it has not just survived, it has thrived, thriven, whatever. It's gotten really, really big, right? It's gotten so big that in the meantime, we have 350,000 members worldwide, spread across somewhere like 16,000 clubs. Our club, for example, we meet once a week, okay, in Lam Chabang. And each meeting follows a specific structure that is time-tested. It's proven to work, to help people with their public speaking. Each meeting has 3 parts. The first one we call table topics. This is where members get an opportunity to speak off the cuff, unprepared. They're getting a subject and they can speak for 2 minutes about whatever it is. So the goal of the table topics is basically to help you to come up with a mini speech that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and deliver it in a mere 2 minutes. The second part of the meeting is the prepared presentations, right? These are typically presentations 5 to 7 minutes long. And they're based on a learning manual that we are using. Nowadays it's all online. These training modules, they have videos to help you absorb all of the information. And each of these prepared speeches has one evaluator assigned to it. And the evaluator then points out the things that the speaker is doing already really, really well, and offers suggestions on what they can do to improve their public speaking skills. All right? I have been a member now of Lyon Toastmasters for 2 years. And I consider becoming a member of Lyon Toastmasters one of the best decisions I have made since I arrived in Thailand 12 years ago. Why? Because ordinarily, we as expats, we don't have a great opportunity to mingle and network with a lot of Thai people. We kind of live a little bit in a bubble here, especially in Pattaya. But being a member of a club like this, our club, for example, has, I would say, 85% Thais. Thais that, you know, come from all walks of life. And then we have a couple of foreigners as well. I'm from Switzerland. We have a member from Italy, one member from the UK. He's actually a member of your club as well, but I cannot see him here today, Brian Flowers. And we have a member from Greece. So we have all kinds of different nationalities, but the bulk is still Thais. And for me, I was looking for a venue that I could use not only as a lab to test some of my speaking, but I also wanted to find like-minded people. People that appreciate personal development. People that appreciate growing and appreciate to help each other to do the same. So this is why I have become a member of Toastmasters. In the meantime, I'm president of Lyon Toastmasters, and I do invite every single person in this room to come as my guest, just to figure out what is it all about. We are a really, really fun club, and we meet, actually, we are the one at the top there, Lyon Toastmasters. We meet every Thursday at 6:30 in Lam Chabang. So this is about 30 minutes from here. But there are a total of about 30 Toastmaster clubs in Thailand already. The other two that are somewhat close to our location here will be Suvarnabhumi Airport, which meets on Wednesday, and Assumption University, which meets on Tuesdays. All right? So if you are not only interested in improving your own public speaking skills, but also interested in getting to know some new friends, making friends with some really, really nice, tremendously cool Thai people, I highly, highly encourage you to come. Visit us once as a guest. There is no pressure whatsoever. You can come and visit us as a guest 2, 3, 4 times. It doesn't really matter. If you do decide to join, it's around $100, 3,000 baht per year. And again, in my opinion, it's one of the best spent baht that I have spent so far. So this is pretty much all from me. I hope you enjoyed some of the tips that I gave you, the 3 principles to improve your own public speaking, your own presentations, and who knows, perhaps I will see some of you in one of our next meetings. Thank you very much.
We have some questions. Any questions?
Yes.
Over there.
Is on? Okay.
You got the bad one now.
Thank you. Yeah, I got the bad one now. Thanks for the presentation. It was great. Very simple, very to the point. I liked it.
Thank you.
You said there were 3 things you did at the Toastmasters. You gave 2. What's the third one?
The evaluation session, right? So there is the table topics.
The evaluation is the third one.
That is the third session then.
Thank you.
Because each meeting has about maybe 2, 3, or 4 different prepared speeches. Each of these speeches gets evaluated by one other member. And these members then, in the third section, gets up and does the evaluation for somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes. In fact, Toastmasters also has contests, speech contests, right? And every year there's the International Speech Contest, which is great to see some of the best presenters in the world on stage and learn from them. But then there are also evaluation contests, right? So how well can people actually provide feedback? Feedback that builds a member up and doesn't put them down, right? There are table topics, contests, all kinds of contests that make the life in our club really, really fun. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Young man.
There.
Yeah. Well, he's a young man compared to me, probably.
It's oil of Olay.
It's a white hair. How do you think this onset of these smartphones is affecting the social fabric? Because I travel regularly in England on a train from where I live to a university. 4 excellent people sat in the seat opposite me. They never each other. Not once. All they were doing was this. So, is there going to be a loss of what you're trying to talk about? Sorry, not trying, doing. And do you think eventually people will lose the power of talking?
I doubt it. Recently, I saw an image on Facebook. There was actually 2 images on Facebook. The first image was of a train, probably in Europe or in America, although more likely in Europe because it was a train. And everybody was staring at their phone, as you just mentioned. But then there was a photograph from somewhere, maybe the 1950s or 60s. It was a black and white photograph. And people were sitting in the train and they all were reading newspapers. Right? So I believe that when we judge our social abilities and our social activities, if we only look at one small little spot, right, then it might be a little bit misleading. But I do believe that people communicate more and more and more. It may just be in a different way, right? For example, in my business right now, and especially with these virus concerns that are around, right, a lot of events, they get canceled. A lot of people are afraid to go to where there's a gathering of a few people. So the demand that I get right now is, can you help me how I can present more effectively in front of a video camera, right? So for that purpose, we are even going to launch a new website called the Presenter Zone, which will allow people to learn and also communicate with each other, but it's all online. But to answer the question, no, I really do not think we will lose our voice. We are just going to use it differently. The gentleman back there with the LA, whatever.
Good morning, sir. I am Christian. I am French, and I have been learning English for 9 years, and Italian for 2 years and a half. I help on Facebook, on my Facebook timeline. I help many friends speaking French speaker that are ashamed to speak, very ashamed, and cannot improve their English. And I suggest you just mentioned reading, how reading is important. But I think reading is very difficult for certain individuals. So I suggest, and I wish to know what do you think about reading at first comic books, for example on amilova.com, and reading, it's magical. Reading a magazine. For example, if you have Windows 10, you can, for free, read magazines. Thank you very much. I would like to know what do you think about.
I am not 100% sure if I understand the question correctly. Are you asking whether reading helps to learn the language and improve the language? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Yes. Reading to me plays a tremendous role in learning any language. Whether it's English, whether it's Thai, right? Even if you want to learn Thai, I think the first step should be get familiar with the alphabet. Learn to read, right? But it only carries us to a certain extent. Reading, in my opinion, is an ideal vehicle to expand your vocabulary. But it does not necessarily give you the confidence that we have as non-native speakers to really speak out, right? Because you may have a tremendously big vocabulary, but you are maybe not 100% sure on how to pronounce certain words in English. So that, again, gives you that little distance. So I believe reading should be part of learning a language, but it should be just one part. And the more important part to me is to actually do it, right? You could not have learned how to drive a car just by reading about it. It's impossible. You do not reach that level of unconscious competence. So reading, yeah, very important, but let it not be the only vehicle to use when learning a new language.
One here.
Since Toastmasters always has an evaluation, I'd like to give you an evaluation of your speech.
Thank you, sir.
You may be the first speaker this club has ever had that has talked directly into the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have to say a big thanks to Ren back there, because he has this wonderful sign made up, right? Because, again, I'm a professionally trained speaker, and normally I like to have the microphone about here, because typically your sound wave, right, it's falling into the microphone. For some reason or another, this microphone isn't all that ideal. And so Ren was very, very kind to remind me 2 or 3 times in the very beginning, hold up that microphone, speak into it like that. So thank you, Ren, for that help. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I am glad that Toastmasters is here. I was in Toastmasters in Sechelt. I really loved it, but then I got moved to Fort McMurray. There wasn't any. So I'm glad to see it, because I really improved my speaking, not using pauses and fillers and hums and haws. And
Yep.
the self-evaluation, or the evaluation of the team, was very confidence building. They gave you pointers. They didn't criticize you. They just said,
Correct.
you know, how to
Yep.
speak better, and they're all on your side, which is nice having an audience that's all on your side, not judging you badly or
That's it.
whatever. So I like Toastmasters, and I give a very high recommendation. I look forward to dropping in a couple times for you.
I would love to, because we are always thriving on members, you know, that have some experience with Toastmasters with other clubs, because we learn every time. Because you would come into our meeting and say, wow, this is really cool, but in our club we did this and that. And this is how we actually can grow.
Yes, it is very good, because I'm not a public speaker.
No,
And
no,
I
no.
don't have it in my career. I was an instrument mechanic, electrician, pipe fitter, did stuff with hands, but it comes in handy in everyday life.
Right.
And you know how to speak, and how to go fluently, and how to line up everything, and do little assignments where you make a 5-minute speech. I thought it was very fun and very challenging.
Awesome.
And improves your mind. When you get older, it's nice to keep active.
Yes, yes.
So I look forward to seeing you.
I look forward to having you as one of our guests. And he just made a really, really good point, because people, when they have to speak in public, one of the reasons that contributes to that anxiety that they have is they don't fully understand that the audience, not just the Toastmasters, but every audience you will ever speak to, wants you to succeed. Right? I ask people sometimes when I really have to work with them on anxiety, right? And I said, imagine you're taking off for 1 day from yourself, right? And I step into you. What do I have to do inside of my head to scare myself, right? What do I have to do? What do you do in order to have such a tremendous anxiety? And I hear all these stories about, well, I talk to myself, and I go like, in your voice or in somebody? No, it's actually my teacher's voice, and it's this criticizing voice, and it's so annoying, right? Or they are seeing images, they are projecting images with audiences that look grim and hateful and big eyes and bigger ears and whatever. And I'm like, what? Well, if I would do these things inside of my brain, right, I will probably be scared as well of speaking to a group of people. So the first thing that is always helpful for people to really realize is that an audience, no matter what, they want you to succeed. Any thought that the audience wants to see you fail is really all made up here. So yeah, thank you for that comment, actually.
Want to hear?
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I prefer to sit down.
Yeah, it's all good. I can see you perfectly.
Thank you very much. Despite practicing at length on my presentation, I couldn't see how to practice the experience of listening to your own voice being amplified and boomed around a conference room to 100 people. It was completely unfamiliar.
Yep.
I couldn't see how I could practice that. And I did note that in your presentation, you mentioned the word practice at least 7 times on one slide. How on earth can you practice for that first time of being in a conference room and hearing your own voice being boomed around?
Yep. Thank you for that question, and it's a very relevant question, right? Because who has a microphone at home? Who has speakers at home that have this power, We don't. So in this case, one way is Toastmasters, right? In our infrastructure, we do have, microphones, slides, and everything like that, so that you can practice it. Another tip that I always give to people, because it's not so much that the hearing of your voice at the same time that you're speaking, but for many people it's simply hearing your own voice. So when I sometimes do these pitch coaching sessions, for investor pitches that need to be very short, 90 seconds. I just did this project with a big seafood investor conference, and they had 90 seconds to present their company, to present themselves, and get investors fired up, so that the investors later on will come up and say, oh, I really want to talk with you about it. And the one thing that I always recommend is film yourself. Take your smartphone, put it on a tripod, and simply give your speech to that phone, and then listen to it. Listen to it over and over again. And at least that gives you a little bit of that own voice, because most people, it's actually funny, because we hear our voice inside of our head so differently than what you hear on the outside. And so many people just don't like it. But if you record yourself and listen to yourself more and more and more, and while you're already at it, that's why I'm recommending to use video as well, because then you can also practice your gestures, because that's another thing that people sometimes are not aware of, how much gestures and body movement really impacts the delivery of your speech. Thank you, sir.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
As a professional speaker, before you start, someone else comes on stage and gives your introduction. How do you feel about long, complicated introductions, or very brief life history told before you arrive?
Well, first of all, I do like to get introduced. That's the first step, right? I do like to get introduced, because I don't like to get up on stage and introduce myself first. Why? Why not? Well, I'm not so interesting. I won't really, I cannot grab your attention by talking about my history and my job before I moved to Thailand and things like that. I got somewhere between 30 and 60 seconds to make a first impression. And talking about myself is probably the worst thing that I can do to do that. So what do I do? In this case here, I start with a quick magic trick, right? Something that gets people excited. So to answer your question, I don't really care how long they talk, right? I don't even listen. I don't even listen. And anybody who usually speaks to other people, right? We all have our rituals. We all do the things inside of our brain the minute or 2 minutes before we walk up here. And in my case, it's simply just to find a peaceful, quiet place, a place that lets me know that, yes, I'm at the right time, right place, and if I speak from my heart, then the audience will certainly appreciate what I'm doing.
Any more questions? Oh, one over there.
I've spoken a few times, and I concur with your concept of if I'm excited about my subject, then that will be promoted to the people I'm talking to. The other thing I noticed that when I start talking, I'm always nervous, no matter what. 100 times, I'm nervous. But once I start talking, boy, it disappears.
You got it.
And the reason it disappears is because I'm involved with my subject. So know what you're going to talk about and know it well.
Correct. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Perfectly said. We have another question over here. And then one in the back as well.
Not a question, but more or less a comment. I do appreciate your presentation because I agree with everything you said.
Thank you, sir.
And myself, I'm not a professional speaker, but I have spoken many, many times in my career in groups of anywhere from about 30 people and up to one time I spoke to a group of 600
wow.
CPAs. Okay. And that was probably one of the worst speaking experiences I ever had. Not because my topic wasn't of interest to the audience, or frankly, I don't think my speaking skills were that bad, but I do have a bit of advice. On a 3-day conference, don't be the last speaker on the last day.
Very good. Yes, I concur with that. Sometimes you cannot choose it, right? You cannot choose it because one person, sadly, has to be the last one. And the good news about that one, if you are ever at a conference like this and you are scheduled to be the last one, right? Well, every coin has two sides. So in that case, just be happy that you are the last one because people will remember you more than the guy that was speaking in the middle. It's as easy as that.
I did that too. I was the last conductor of the last tune at a Sacred Harp singing convention. If any, I just bore you all with this, but you have such power to wrap up the whole thing, and I just happened to pick the right tune. Lucky, just lucky. Anyway, here's my question. I have a car, and I'm interested in coming up to the Lyon Toastmasters.
All
and
right.
is anyone else here interested in a ride up?
Oh.
Some Thursday.
Oh,
so
I
just,
like that.
Just come to me, and I'll do arrangements.
Wow.
You said 6:30, right?
6:30. We are usually opening the room at 6 o'clock, so we can mingle a little bit, have a little light snacks and things like that, which is great. When Thai people get together, there's always food spread out, So that's already one big motivator.
Is the address online, or can you give it to us?
Yes, it's actually. I skipped it too fast. I should have put it on the last slide, but it's right on here. If you go to LyonToastmasters.org, LyonToastmasters.org, and then go to the contact page. And where we are located is basically just down Sukhumvit, right? And keep on driving on Sukhumvit until you come to Sriracha. You see the Harbor Mall. Is everybody familiar, or some of you familiar with the Harbor Mall? And we are on the other side of Sukhumvit, few hundred meters after the Harbor Mall. But there's a map on our website. Cannot miss it. I would love to see you there. Yes.
One more here.
Yes, talking about first and last, my dad always told me when you're out with your group of friends, always buy the first drink because nobody ever remembers who buys the last.
Well, yes, it depends on where you're speaking. If you're speaking in a bar, then I'm absolutely with you there as well. Yes, the last one nobody remembers there.
Have we any more questions of this very
all right.
persuasive man?
The one back there. Brad.
Yeah, can you forward to your next slide, please?
Absolutely.
What are those 6 little dots on the left?
I was wondering if somebody would catch that one, right? I added that slide at the very, very end, and usually I am more careful with my slides. Absolutely am more careful with my slides. The reason why this is all on one slide is basically I added it at the very, very end, and I'm creating my slides on a Mac. And when you create the slides on a Mac and then you export them to PowerPoint, a lot of things get lost in translation, right? And one of the things that gets lost are the transitions to build up point by point by point. But yes, very observant. Thank you for letting me know. Yes, sir.
I noticed that some speakers stay at the podium, never move. You exercised a lot today during your talk. Which do you prefer?
Well, obviously walking, right? I think nothing is worse than having a static speaker, like, well, we know these from some of the politicians, they even hold on, and you can already hear it in my voice. I've just lost so much of the energy. And to me, one of the best examples, and I know it's probably also one of the most controversial people in the world right now, is President Donald Trump, right? Some people find him the best president in the world, some people rather the opposite. I do not want to go there, but what I want to point out is that he's actually a very savvy communicator, extremely savvy communicator when he can speak freely. But as soon as he's tied into an official venue, as soon as he is tied to the teleprompter, he loses all of the energy. It's almost like watching two different people. So to me, a podium creates an artificial barrier between me and the audience, right? And I also do certain things because the amazing thing is that we process language unconsciously. We process language unconsciously. And it's not just the words, it's not just the voice, it's also the body. I'm getting some signals over here that we are kind of pushing the time. Now, let me ask you one last question. Who wants to know how I did that trick in the beginning? Only 3. Okay, in that case, I will not disclose. 4? I need at least 30 people in here, otherwise it's not worthwhile,
It's everybody.
All right. Well, you missed a small little detail. As I said, a good magic trick very often relies on a principle. Some of these principles are misdirection, right? Making people look somewhere else when the action actually takes place over here, or have them do. So, if you remember, I started out doing this exercise together with you, right? And I cannot do this myself. It's physically impossible. But if you remember back, at one point, I unfolded my hands and pointed to the left corner, and I said, can you please move your hands a little bit up? And when I folded my hands again, of course, all magic is cheating. Thank you very much. You have been a really, really great audience.